I'm gonna level with you. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. This doesn't really feel like a stand-up comedy show. This feels more like... I'll show you what it feels like. It feels like I'm doing a broadcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this emergency COVID-19 broadcast for citizens of the Islamic State of Syria and the Levant. May we remind all citizens to wash your hands vigorously and regularly, and remind all citizens that at the current moment, jihad is strictly forbidden. Just very hard to maintain those social distancing guidelines while exploding in multiple different directions. Now, it has been a bad year for the Islamic State. We've lost lots of ground. Membership numbers are down, down, and down. And on top of that, we've been upended by an invisible fucking disease. But good news for us, it has been a bad year for everybody. It started, of course, with the Australian bushfires. That was then followed by the assassination of General Soleimani, followed by Kobe Bryant's helicopter falling out the sky, followed by COVID-19, and now currently America's on fire, and not even in the parts with the bush. Such an unprecedented overload of negative information is enough to make you forget who General Soleimani is or what Iran stand for. And by the way, Tyneside, if the takeover goes through, Iran now stand for the fucking enemy. If you're white, you must have heard phrases you never before knew previously existed. Phrases like Black Lives Matter, check your privilege, and stay woke. And it must feel exhausting. And if you're black, you've watched Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Aubrey Ahmed, and countless others I do not have the time to pay tribute to, murdered in cold blood. And now you're watching me tell white people they should feel exhausted. And if you're Indian in all this, you can latch on with a disingenuous comedy monologue and not feel exhausted, even though you're covertly hiding the fact you think Iggy Azalea is a better technical rapper than Kendrick Lamar. We're increasingly frustrated, increasingly fragmented by race, political opinion, gender, class, and sexuality. We're increasingly frustrated that while one person is murdered for being black in one geographic location, other people can drive 240 miles up north with the fucking plague in another geographic location. We're increasingly tricked into thinking subconsciously that giving our opinion is important, and then we're told by hypocrites in the media, people who've built their entire careers off loving the sounds of their own voices, that maybe your opinion isn't as important as mine. And just when you think humanity might realize that an app that tricks us into judging people whose lives we know nothing about is maybe a bad thing for humanity, God goes ahead and makes it a disease. And now we're not just judging people online, we're judging people offline. Judging our neighbors in our own communities for doing things such as going to the beach, for leaving their house to see a loved one because they so have the human urge to procreate, for making contingency plans for their 4-year-old child on the off chance they and the child's mother die. Now, I'm not saying the threat from COVID-19 isn't very real. I am not saying lockdown wasn't or still isn't a good policy. My finger is not pointed at doctors, at scientists, at advisors, or at the government. My finger is pointed at you, the people. How the fuck did we get here? I'll give you a clue. It might be from the fact that now we get our comedy from our politics, our drama from our reality TV, and you're currently getting your morals from a comedian who may or may not be an Islamic State terrorist. Sorry, so-called comedian. Nevertheless, we have never been as divided as this, and I wonder how we got here, because this all happened the same year, ladies and gentlemen, that we flew to Mars. Only humans could be so selfish. To be faced with a potential end of the human species, a global pandemic, to think, well, if we're going down, we're taking all you alien motherfuckers with us. We're putting this in black holes and on every single planet. But there is some hope, ladies and gentlemen. My mother told me that watching the moon landing was the most exciting and scariest moment of her life. It never occurred to me that it might have been scary because she was living through the Cold War, and that anxiety she felt then is the same anxiety we feel now. It never occurred to me that my grandma probably felt this anxiety so much more heightened when at 12 years old she was forced to cross from Pakistan into India during partition. It never occurred to me that my granddad John, when he felt the exact same dread, a lot worse, when he stepped off those boats into the European beaches for the first time during World War II. That is the dread we now feel, ladies and gentlemen, the dread of our ancestors, and we feel it everywhere in the world. Everywhere except, of course, New Zealand. Because, of course, the country that gave us, why bother, Sam? To show them that there's some hope, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. Of course, they would be the ones to show us that there is some light at the end of this tunnel. And that light, of course, is the beacon of fucking Gondor. Now, I don't say this, ladies and gentlemen, to try and pretend to flex left-wing credentials, and I don't say it to even pretend to give a fuck about marginalised community. I say this for us, ladies and gentlemen, the comfortable middle classes, the people for whom the system works, the people who go to comedy on Friday and Saturday nights in Middle England all around the country. Inequality has not been this high anywhere since the French Revolution. And the French Revolution, for all intents and purposes, was a riot where those who held all the property and assets were violently overthrown and their families brutally murdered. King Louis's own son, Louis Charles, was 10 years old and was arrested, thrown in a cell, abused, and then disappeared. That's not white people in Portugal I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen. That's white people in their own homes. This may be new for us, but for black people like Breonna Taylor, this is just an everyday experience. So I beg you, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't want that history textbook to come reality like it has time after time after time, if you don't want this movie to be any more real than it currently is, then I beg you, if you don't want to empathize with black people, start to sympathize with them. If you don't want to feel like a black person, start listening to them. Oh, that felt good. I would have never have done that. I would have never have done that if there was an audience here. If there was an audience here, I would have just done packy jokes.
I'm still rolling, Mel.
What do you mean we're still rolling?